Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Sutra-59. In the space of the empty pot, recognize Shiva. Ghatadibhajane drishtim bittistyakva vinikshipet thallayam tat kshanat gatva thallayat tanmayo bhavet. Let the mind dwell on the space inside a pot. The mind takes the shape of the space and the walls of the pot wither away. The mind is established in the emptiness. The sutra says, look inside an empty pot or any empty enclosure. Let the mind be absorbed in the emptiness of the space. You are walking on a road and notice a well on the way. You go near the well to look what is inside. The well is empty and goes deep inside. Watch your mind during that moment. You will notice calmness in the mind. Several thoughts in the mind seem to have disappeared. Staring into the emptiness of the well has calmed the mind. The sutra says, look at the space inside a pot. Let the mind be absorbed in the emptiness of the space. Is that all? How long can you stare at the emptiness of the pot? Maybe for 5 minutes. In the 5 minutes, you may experience some calmness in the mind. Will you be able to carry the calmness with you when you move away from the pot? This sutra is communicating something significant here. It is prompting us to inquire deeply into the emptiness of the space in the pot. When did the space come into the pot? The answer is when the pot was created. Where was the space before the pot was created? Was it non-existent or existent? Non-existent means that it never existed before coming into the pot. Existent means that it was existent in some other form. Let us stay with these questions. A sculptor is about to create a sculpture from a stone. How does he create the sculpture? He sees the form of the sculpture in the stone and removes the portions of the stone that does not belong to the form. He chisels away the portions of the stone that does not belong to the form. This is how the sculpture or the form comes out of the stone. Before coming out of the stone, where was the form? Was it existent or non-existent? Let us say that it was non-existent. How can a thing which is non-existent come into existence? It is impossible. This is like someone describing a rabbit with 2 horns. Such a rabbit does not exist. The sculpture cannot be non-existent. It should be existent. It was existent in some other form. It was existent in the stone in a potential form. This is like the seed of a banyan tree. A huge tree grows out of the seed. Before its growth, the tree is in a potential form in the seed. Similarly, when did the space come into existence in the pot? Where was the space before the pot was created? Was it non-existent or existent? Let us turn the question to the pot itself. Was the pot existent or non-existent before its creation? Assuming it is a clay pot, the pot should have been existent in the clay in some other form. It was existent in the clay in some other form before it came into existence. The intelligence called the potter removed the portions of the clay that was not part of the pot. The pot emerged from the clay just like how the sculpture emerged from the stone. Like how the sculpture and the stone are inseparable, the pot and the clay are inseparable. The clay is the cause or karanam and the pot is effect or karyam. The effect exists in the cause in a potential form. When the pot comes into existence, the space also appeared in the pot. The space too was in a potential form before its appearance. The space is the effect, like how the pot is the effect. The effect pre-exists in the cause. This is called as Satkaryavada. The Karyam pre-existing in the Karanam is Satkaryavada. While dwelling on the sutra, we are discussing the pot and the space in a similar context. Let us extend our inquiry further. How do you know that the clay pot appeared from the clay? There should be an observer, isn't it? There should be an observer who has observed both the clay and the pot. Firstly, the clay was cognized at a different instant of time, and secondly, the pot that appeared out of the clay was cognized at a different instant of time by the observer. There was one observer and two cognitions. The observer is the witness. This is based on recognition. There was recognition of clay in the first place. Then there was recognition that the pot came out of the clay. This recognition is called as pratyabhijñā. The pot always existed in the clay in a potential form. For example, there is a pot in a dark room. You cannot see the pot. It does not mean that the pot doesn't exist in the room. When you switch on the light, you can see the pot. What was preventing you from seeing the pot in the room? The darkness. When you remove the darkness, the pot appears. This is exactly like how the sculpture appeared from the stone. Varieties of objects can appear out of the clay. They are of various names and forms. It can be a pot, or a cup, or a clay doll, etc. But at a given point in time, only one kind of name and form can appear from the clay. For a particular form to appear, other forms must be destroyed. This is what the potter does. To bring out the pot from the clay, the potter destroys the other forms. Let us go back to the space in the pot. The space took the form of the pot when it came into existence. The space was in a potential form before it came into existence. Can we conclude that the space inside the pot appeared from the wider space outside? The small pot space was in a potential form in the wider space outside the pot. The most important thing to note here is the recognition, pratyabhijñā. In pratyabhijñā, there are two cognitions and one observer. The wider space is cognized in the first instance. When the pot comes into existence, the space inside the pot is cognized in the second instance. The space inside the pot appeared at a different instant of time. But the observer is common for both the instances. Let the mind turn towards the observer. When the sutra says, let the mind dwell on the space inside a pot, it means that let the mind turn towards the observer. The observer is the witness consciousness. It is not about just staring into the emptiness of the pot for a period of time. The space is nothing but a name and form. We discussed in detail in the previous sutras about the names and forms, the nama-rupa prapancha. The nama-rupa prapancha is mithya or unreal. Let the mind turn towards the real. The real is the observer. Let the mind turn towards the observer. The dharana is simple. Dwell on the knowledge that the karyam or the effect pre-exists in the karanam or the cause. Who is the knower of this knowledge? When you stare at the space inside the pot, let the mind turn towards the observer. Who is the knower? In the larger context, the Shastram says that the entire universe emerged from Shiva. In the previous sutra, we discussed Shiva Tattva. The creation appears out of Shiva Tattva and ultimately dissolves into it. The Shiva Tattva is the Brahman or the consciousness. It is the Shiva Tattva which is the reality. From the creation point of view, Shiva is the Karanam and the creation is Karyam. The Karyam pre-exists in the Karanam. The creation pre-exists in Shiva. The Shastram says that nothing new is created. There is no creation at all. The creation existed in the potential form. This is avyakritam. The Shastram also says there is no destruction. During destruction, the creation goes back to the potential form. When you destroy the pot, it goes back to the clay and resides in a potential form only to appear back again. Similarly, the space in the pot. It appeared from the wider space outside and will go back to it eventually. The creation appeared from Shiva and goes back to Shiva ultimately. The one non-dual Brahman or Shiva appears as the creation. Like how the sculpture appears out of the stone. The sculpture is the Shakti Tattva and the stone is Shiva Tattva. How can there be a difference between the stone and the sculpture? How can there be a difference between Shiva and Shakti? It is our ignorance that creation has taken place. The ignorance projects a world that does not exist. This is jnana. The knower of this is the one with profound understanding of Shiva. The sutra says, let the mind turn towards the knower. The knower is the one who recognizes the unity of everything in the creation. This is liberating knowledge. When the mind dwells on the knower, it dissolves and attains a state of laya. It attains laya in Shiva. Gatadi bhajane drishtim bittistyakva vinikshipet thallayam tat kshanat gatva thallayat tanmayo bhavet. Gata adi bhajane. Bhajana is a container, a pot or something like the pot. Bittihi tyaktva. By discarding the walls of the pot. Tat kshanat gatva. The moment when the impressions of the walls of the pot are removed from the mind and the mind dwells in the emptiness of the pot, vinikshipet tat layam. It gets absorbed in the emptiness. Tanmayaha absorbed bhavet. Let the mind dwell on the space inside a pot. The mind takes the shape of the space and the walls of the pot wither away. The mind is established in the emptiness. Let us contemplate on the pot space in this way. The space is the appearance of the Brahman, like how a sculpture appears from the stone. This is true for every name and form in the universe. The knower is identified with Shiva, not with the names and forms. When you dwell on the space inside the pot, you see your own reflection, your own Swarupam. Your Swarupam is Shiva. Sayohavai tatparam Brahmaveda Brahmaiva bhavati. The one who knows the highest Brahman becomes that Brahman.